Chapter 9 0605 hours, September 12th, 2525, Military Calendar. UNSC Destroyer Pioneer, en route to Eridanus System. John and the other Spartans stood at ease. The briefing room aboard the UNSC Destroyer Pioneer made him uncomfortable. The holographic projectors at the fore end of the triangular room showed the field of stars visible off the bow of the ship. John wasn't used to seeing so much space. He kept expecting the room to decompress explosively. The stars flickered and faded, and the overhead lights warmed. Chief Petty Officer Mendez and Dr. Halsey entered the room. The Spartans snapped to attention. "At ease," Mendez said. He clasped his hands behind his back and clenched his jaw muscles. The chief looked almost nervous. That made John nervous, too. Dr. Halsey walked to the podium. The overhead light reflected off her glasses. "Good morning, Spartans. I have good news for you. The word has come down. Command has decided to test your unique abilities. You have a new mission, an insurgent base in the Eridanus system." A star map appeared on the wall and zoomed in to show a warm orange sun ringed with 12 planets. In 2513, an armed insurrection in the system was suppressed by the UNSC force. Operation Trebuchet. An intersystem tactical map appeared, and tiny icons representing destroyers and carriers winked on. They engaged a force of 100 smaller ships. Pinpoints of fire appeared against the dark. "The insurrection was put down," Dr. Halsey continued. "However, elements of the rebel forces escaped and regrouped in the local asteroid belt." The map tilted and moved into the circle of debris around the star. "Billions of rocks," Dr. Halsey said, "where they hid from our forces and continued to hide to this day. For some time, O&I believed that the rebels were disorganized and were lacking in leadership. That appears to have changed. We believe that one of these asteroids has been hollowed out, and that a formidable base has been constructed within. UNSC explorations into the belt have met either with no contact or with an ambush by superior forces." She paused, pushed up her glasses, and added, "The Office of Naval Intelligence has also confirmed that FleetCom has discovered a security breach within their organization, a rebel sympathizer leaking information to these forces." John and the other Spartans shifted uneasily. A leak? It was possible. Deja had shown them many historical battles that had been won and lost because of traitors or informants, but it never occurred to him that it could happen in the UNSC. A flat picture flashed over the star map. A middle-aged man with thinning hair, a neatly trimmed beard, and watery gray eyes. "This is their leader," Dr. Halsey said. "Colonel Robert Watts. The original photo was taken after Operation Trebuchet and has been computer-aged. Your mission is to infiltrate the rebel base, capture Watts, and return him, alive and unharmed, to UNSC-controlled space. This will deprive the rebels of their new leadership, and it will provide O&I a chance to interrogate Watts and root out traitors within FleetCom." Dr. Halsey stepped aside. "Chief Mendez?" Mendez exhaled and unclasped his hands. He strode to the podium and cleared his throat. "This operation will be different from your previous missions. You will be engaging the enemy using live rounds and lethal force. They will be returning the favor. If there is any doubt, any confusion, and make no mistake, in combat there will be confusion. Take no chances. Kill first, ask questions later. Support on this mission will be limited to the resources and firepower of this destroyer," Mendez continued. "This is to minimize the chance of a leak in the command structure." Mendez walked to the star map. The face of Colonel Watts snapped off, and blueprints for a Parabola-class freighter appeared. "Although we don't know the location of the rebel base, we believe they receive periodic shipments from Eridanus II. The independent freighter Laden is due to leave space dock in 6 hours for a routine recertification of her engines.
She's being loaded with enough food and water to supply a small city. Additionally, her captain has been identified as a rebel officer, thought to have been killed during Operation Trebuchet. You will slip aboard this freighter and hopefully hitch a ride to the rebel base. Once there, infiltrate the installation, grab Watts, and get off of that rock any way you can."
Chief Mendez gazed at them all.
"Questions?"
"Sir," John said, "what are our extraction options?"
"You have two options. A panic button that will relay a distress signal to a pre-established listening ship. Also, the Pioneer will stay on station, briefly. Our window here is 13 hours.
He tapped the star map on the edge of the asteroid belt, and it glowed with a blue nav marker.
I'll leave the extraction choice up to you. But let me point out that this asteroid belt has a circumference of more than 1 billion kilometers, making it impossible to canvass with O&I surveillance craft. If things get hot, you will be on your own. Any other questions?"
The Spartans sat, silent and immobile.
"No? Well, listen up, recruits," Mendez added. "This time I've told you all the twists that I know of. Be prepared for anything." His gaze fixed on John. "Squad leader, you are hereby promoted to the rank of Petty Officer 3rd Class." "Sir!" John snapped to attention. "Assemble your team and equipment. Be ready to muster at 0300. We'll drop you off at the Eridanus 2 docks. You're on your own from there." "Yes, sir," John said.
Mendez saluted. He and Dr. Halsey then left the room. John turned to face his teammates. The other Spartans stood at attention. 33. Too many for this operation. He needed a small team. 5 or 6 maximum. "Sam, Kelly, Linda, and Fred. Meet me in the weapons locker in 10 minutes. The other Spartans sighed, and their gaze dropped to the deck. "The rest of you fall out. You'll have the more difficult part of this mission. You'll have to wait here." The weapons locker of the Pioneer had been stocked with a bewildering array of combat equipment. On a table were guns, knives, communication gear, body armor explosives, medical packs, survival gear, portable computers, even a thruster pack for maneuvering in space. More important than the equipment, however, John assessed his team. Sam had recovered from the augmentation faster than any of the other Spartans. He paced impatiently around the crates of grenades. He was the strongest of them all. He stood taller than John by a head. He had grown out his sandy hair to 3 centimeters. Chief Mendez had warned him that he was going to look like a civilian soon. Kelly, in contrast, had taken the longest to recover. She stood in the corner with her arms crossed over her chest. John had thought she wasn't going to make it. She was still gaunt, and her hair had yet to grow back. Her face, however, still had its rough, angular beauty. She scared John a little, too. She was fast before. Now, no one could touch her if she didn't allow it. Fred sat cross-legged on the deck, twirling a razor-edged combat knife in glistening arcs. He always came in second in all the contests. John thought he could have come in first, but he just didn't like the attention. He was neither too short nor too tall. He wasn't overly muscled or slim. His black hair was shot with streaks of silver, a feature he hadn't had before the augmentation. If anyone in the group could blend into a crowd, it would be him. Linda was the quietest member of the group. She was pale, had close-cropped red hair and green eyes. She was a crack shot, an artist with a sniper rifle. Kelly circled the table once, and then selected a pair of grease-stained blue coveralls. Her name had been sloppily embroidered on the chest.
"These our new trainee uniforms?"
"O&I provided them," John said. "They're supposed to match what the crew of the Leyden wears." Kelly held up the coveralls and frowned.
"They don't give a girl much to work with." "Try this on for size."
Linda held a black bodysuit up to Kelly's long, slender frame. They had used these black suits before. They were form-fitting, lightweight polymer body armor. They could deflect a small caliber round, and had refrigeration heating units that would mask infrared signatures. The integrated helmet had encryption and communications gear, a heads-up display, and thermal and motion detectors. Sealed tight, the unit had a 15-minute reserve of oxygen to let the wearer survive in a vacuum. The suits were uncomfortable, and they were tricky to repair in the field. And they always needed repairs. "They're too tight," Kelly said. "It'll limit my range of motion." "We wear them for this op," John told her. "There are too many places between here and there with nothing to breathe but vacuum. As for the rest of your equipment, take what you want, but stay light. Without recon data on this place, we're going to be moving fast, or we'll be dead." The team started selecting their weapons first. "390 caliber?" Fred asked. "Yes," John replied. "Everyone take guns that use 390 caliber ammunition so we can share clips if we have to, except Linda." Linda gravitated to a matte black long-barreled rifle, the SRS 99C-S2AM. The sniper rifle system had modular sections, scopes, stocks, barrels, even the firing mechanism could be swapped. She quickly stripped the rifle down and reconfigured it. She assembled a flash and sound suppression barrel, and then, to compensate for the lower muzzle velocity, she increased the ammunition caliber to 45. She ditched all the sights and scopes and settled for an integrated link to her helmet's heads-up display. She pocketed 5 extended ammunition clips. John also chose an MA-2B, a cut-down version of the standard MA-5B assault rifle. It was tough and reliable, with electronic targeting and an ammo supply indicator. It also had a recoil reduction system and could deliver an impressive 15 rounds per second. He picked up a knife, 20-centimeter blade, 1 serrated edge, non-reflective titanium carbide, and balanced for throwing. John grabbed the panic button, a tiny single-shot emergency beacon. It had 2 settings. The red setting alerted the Pioneer that it had hit the fan and to come in guns blazing. The green setting merely marked the location of the base for later assault by the UNSC. He took a double handful of ammo clips, then paused. He set them down and pocketed 5. If they got into a firefight or he'd need that much firepower, their mission was over anyway. Everyone took similar equipment, with a few variations. Kelly selected a small computer pad with IR links. She also had their field medical kit. Fred packed a standard-issue lockbreaker. Linda selected 3 nav marker transmitters, each the size of a tick. The trackers could be adhered to an object and would broadcast that object's location to the Spartans' heads-up displays. Sam hefted 2 medium-sized backpacks, damage packs. They were filled with C-12, enough high explosives to blow through 3 meters of battleship armor plate. "You have enough of that stuff?" Kelly asked him wryly. "You think I should take more?" Sam replied and smiled. "Nothing like a little fireworks to celebrate the end of a mission." "Everyone ready?" John asked. Sam's smile disappeared, and he slapped an extended clip into his MA-2B. "Ready." Kelly gave him a thumbs up. Fred and Linda nodded. "Then let's go to work." Chapter 10. 1210 hours, September 14th, 2525, military calendar. Epsilon Adrani System. Eridanus 2 Space Dock. Civilian cargo ship. Laden. Registry number F0980 Whiskey. Spartan 117 in position. Next check-in at 0400. John clicked off the microphone, encrypted the message, and fed it into his comm relay. He triggered a secure burst transmission to the Athens, the ONI Prowler ship on station a few AUs distant. He and his teammates climbed onto the support girders. In silence, the team rigged a web of support nets so they could rest in relative comfort. Below them lay 100,000 liters of black water, and surrounding them, 2 centimeters of stainless steel. Sam rigged the fill sensor so the reservoir's computer wouldn't let any more water flow into the storage tank. The lights in their helmets cast a pattern of crossing and crisscrossing reflection lines. A perfect hiding spot, all according to plan, John thought, and allowed himself a small grin of triumph. The tech specs that O&I had procured on the Layton showed a number of hydroponic pods mounted aboard the ship's carousel system. The massive water tanks used gravity feed to irrigate the ship's space-grown crops. Perfect. They had easily slipped past the lone guard in the Layton's main cargo bay and into the nearly deserted center section. The water tank would mask their thermal signatures and block any motion sensors. The only risky element entered the picture if the center section stopped spinning. Things could get very messy inside the tank very fast, but John doubted that would happen. Kelly set up a tiny microwave relay outside the top hatch. She propped her data pad on her stomach and linked to the ship's network. "I'm in," she reported. "There's no AI or serious encryption. Accessing their system now." She tapped the pad a few more times and activated the intrusion software, the best that O&I could provide. A moment later, the pad pulsed to indicate success. "They've got a nav trajectory to the asteroid belt. ETA is 10 hours. "Good work," John said. "Team, we'll sleep in shifts." Sam, Fred, and Linda snapped off their flashlights. The tank reverberated as the Layton's engines flared to life. The water tilted as they accelerated away from the orbital docking station. John remembered Eridanus, too, vaguely recalled that it once was home. He wondered if his old school, his family, were still there. He squelched his curiosity. Speculation made for a fine mental exercise, but the mission came first. He had to stay alert, or failing that, grab some sleep so he would be alert when he needed to be. Chief Mendez must have told them 1,000 times, "Rest can be as deadly a weapon as a pistol or grenade." "I've got something," Kelly whispered, and handed him her data pad. It displayed the cargo manifest for the Layton. John scrolled down the list. Water, flour, milk, frozen orange juice, welding rods, superconducting magnets for a fusion reactor. No mention of weapons. "I give up," he said. "What am I looking for?" "I'll give you a hint," Kelly replied. "The chief smokes them." John flicked back through the list. There, Sweet William cigars. Next to them on the manifest was a crate of champagne, a Beta Centauri vintage. There were fast-chilled New York steaks and Swiss chocolates. These items were stored in a secure locker. They had the same routing codes. "Luxury items," Kelly murmured. "I bet they're headed straight for a special delivery to Colonel Watts or his officers." "Good work," John replied. "We'll tag this stuff and follow it." "Won't be that easy," Fred said from the darkness. He flicked on his flashlight and peered back at John. "There are a million ways this can go wrong. We're going in without recon. I don't like it." "We only have one advantage on this mission," John said. "The rebels have never been infiltrated. They'll feel relatively safe and won't be expecting us. But every extra second we stay, that's another chance for us to be spotted. We'll follow Kelly's hunch." "You questioning orders?" Sam asked Fred. "Scared?" There was a slight hint of challenge in his voice. Fred thought for a moment. "No," he whispered, "but this is no training mission. Our targets won't be firing stun rounds." He sighed. "I just don't want to fail." "We're not going to fail," John told him. "We've accomplished every mission we've been on before." That wasn't entirely true. The augmentation mission had wiped out half of the Spartans. They weren't invincible. But John wasn't scared. A little nervous, maybe, but he was ready. "Rotate sleep cycles," John said. "Wake me up in 4 hours." He turned over and quickly nodded off to the sound of the sloshing water. He dreamed of grav ball and a coin spinning in the air. John caught it and yelled, "Eagle!" as he won again. He always won. Kelly nudged John's shoulder, and he was instantly awake, hand on his assault rifle. "We're decelerating," she whispered, and pointed her light into the water below. The liquid tilted at a 20-degree inclination.
"Lights off,"
John ordered. They were plunged into total darkness. He popped the hatch and snaked the fiber optic probe attached to his helmet through the crack. All clear. They climbed out, then rappelled down the back of the 10-meter-tall tank. They donned their grease-stained coveralls and removed their helmets. The black suits looked a little bulky beneath the work clothes, but the disguise would hold up to a cursory inspection. With their weapons and gear in duffel bags, they'd pass as crew, from a distance. They crept through a deserted corridor and into the cargo bay. They heard a million tiny metallic pings as gravity settled the ship. The laden must be docking to a spinning station or a rotating asteroid. The cargo bay was a huge room, stacked to its ceiling with barrels and crates. There were massive tanks of oil. Automated robot forklifts scurried between rows, checking for items that might have come loose in transit. There was a terrific clang as a docking clamp grabbed the ship.
"Cigars are this way,"
Kelly whispered. She consulted her data pad, then tucked it back into her pocket. They moved out, clinging to the shadows. They stopped every few meters, listened, and made sure their fields of fire were clear. Kelly held up her hand and made a fist. She pointed to the secure hatch on the starboard side of the hold. John signaled Fred and Kelly and motioned them to go forward. Fred used the lockbreaker on the door and it popped open. They entered and closed it behind them. John, Sam, and Linda waited. There was a sudden motion, and the Spartans snapped their weapons to firing positions. A robot forklift passed down an adjacent aisle. The massive aft doors of the cargo hold parted with a hiss. Light spilled into the hold. A dozen dock workers dressed in coveralls entered. John gripped his MA-2B tighter. One man looked down the aisle where they crouched in the shadows. He stooped, paused. John raised his weapon slowly, his hand steady, and sighted on the man's chest.
"Always shoot for center mass,"
Mendez had barked during weapons training. The man stood, stretched his back, and moved on, whistling quietly to himself. Fred and Kelly returned, and Kelly opened and closed her hand, palm out. She had placed the marker. John grabbed his helmet from his duffel bag and slipped it on. He pinged the navigation marker and saw the blue triangle flash once on his heads-up display. He returned Kelly's thumbs up and removed the helmet. John stowed his helmet and MA-2B and motioned for the rest of his team to do the same. They casually walked out of the Laden's aft cargo hold and onto the rebel base. The docking bay was hewn from solid rock. The ceiling stretched a kilometer high. Bright lights overhead effectively illuminated the place, looking like tiny suns in the sky. There were hundreds of ships docked within the cavern. Tiny single-craft, Mako-class corvettes, cargo freighters, and even a captured UNSC Pelican dropship. Each craft was held by massive cranes that traveled on railroad tracks. The tracks led toward a series of large airlock doors. That's how the Laden must have gotten inside. There were people everywhere, workers and men in crisp white uniforms. John's first instinct was to seek cover. Every one of them was a potential threat. He wished he had his gun in his hand. He remained calm and strode among these strangers. He had to set the right example for his team. If his recent encounter with the ODSTs in the gym of the Atlas had been any indication, he knew his team wouldn't interact well with the natives. John made his way past dock workers and robotic trams full of cargo and vendors selling roasted meat on sticks. He walked toward a set of double doors set in the far rock wall, marked Public Showers. He pushed through and didn't look back. The place was almost empty. One man was singing in the shower, and there were 2 rebel officers undressing near the towel dispensers. John led his team to the most distant corner of the locker room and hunkered down on one of the benches. Linda sat with her back to them, on lookout duty. "So far so good," John whispered. "This will be our fallback position if everything falls apart and we get separated." Sam nodded. Okay. We have a lead on how to find the colonel. Anyone have any ideas how to get off this rock once we grab him? Back into the Leiden's water tank? Too slow, Kelly said. We've got to assume that when Colonel Watt goes missing, his people are going to look for him. There was a Pelican on the dock, John said. We'll take it. Now, let's figure out how to operate the cranes and airlocks. Sam hefted his pack of explosives. I know just the way to politely knock on those airlock doors. Don't worry. Sam tapped his left foot. He only did that when he was eager to move. Fred's hands were clenched into fists. He might be nervous, but he had it under control. Kelly yawned, and Linda sat absolutely still. They were ready. John got his helmet, donned it, and checked the nav marker. Bearing 320, he said. It's on the move. He picked up his gear. And so are we. They left the showers and strode through the dock, past massive drop doors and into a city. This part of the asteroid looked like a canyon carved into the rock. John could barely make out the ceiling far overhead. There were skyscrapers and apartment buildings, factories, and even a small hospital. John ducked into an alley, slipped on his helmet, and pinpointed the blue nav marker. It overlay a cargo tram that silently rolled down the street. There were 3 armed guards riding in the back. The Spartans followed at a discreet distance. John checked his exit routes. Too many people, and too many unknowns. Were the people here armed? Would they all engage if fighting started? A few of the people gave him strange looks. Spread out, he whispered to his team. We look like we're on a parade ground. Kelly stepped up her pace and pulled ahead. Sam fell behind. Fred and Linda drifted to the right and left. The cargo tram turned and made its way slowly through a crowded street. It stopped at a building. The structure was 12 stories tall, with balconies on every floor. John guessed these were barracks. There were 2 armed guards in white uniforms at the front entrance. The 3 men in the tram got out and carried the crate inside. Kelly glanced at John. He nodded, giving her the go-ahead. She approached the 2 guards, smiling. John knew her smile wasn't friendly. She was smiling because she was finally getting a chance to put her training to the test. Kelly waved to the guard and pulled open the door. He asked her to stop and show her identification. She stepped inside, grabbed his rifle, twisted, and dragged him inside with her. The other guard stepped back and leveled his rifle. John sprang at him from behind, grabbed his neck and snapped it, then dragged his limp body inside. The entry room had cinder block walls and a steel door with a swipe card lock. A security camera dangled limply over Kelly's head. The guard she had dragged in lay at her feet. She was already running a cracking program on the lock, using her data pad. John retrieved his MA-2B and covered her. Fred and Linda entered and slipped out of their coveralls, then donned their helmets. Nav marker is moving, Linda reported. Mark 270, elevation 10 meters, 20, 35 and holding. I'd say that's the top floor. Sam entered, pulled the door shut behind him, and then jammed the lock. All clear out there. The inner door clicked. Door's open, Kelly said. John, Kelly, and Sam slipped out of their coveralls as Fred and Linda covered them. John activated the motion and thermal displays in his helmet. The target sight glowed as he raised his MA-2B. Go, John said. Kelly pushed open the door. Linda stepped in and to the right. John entered and took the left. 2 guards were seated behind the lobby's reception desk. Another man, without a uniform, stood in front of the desk, waiting to be helped. 2 more uniformed men stood by the elevator. Linda shot the 3 near the desk. John eliminated the targets by the elevator. 5 rounds, 5 bodies hit the floor. Fred entered and policed the bodies, dragging them behind the counter. Kelly moved to the stairwell, opened the door, and gave the all-clear signal. The elevator pinged and its doors opened. They all wheeled, rifles leveled, but the car was empty. John exhaled, then motioned them to take the stairs. Kelly took point. Sam brought up the rear. They silently went up 9 double flights of stairs. Kelly halted on an upper landing. She pointed to the interior of the building, then pointed up. John detected faint blurs of heat on the 12th floor. They'd have to pick a better route, a way in that no one would expect. John opened the door. There was an empty hallway. No targets. He went to the elevator doors and pried them open. Then he turned on his black suit's cooling elements to mask his thermal signature. The others did the same, and faded from his thermal imaging display. John and Sam climbed up the elevator cable. John glanced down. A 30-meter plunge into darkness. He might survive that fall. His bones wouldn't break, but there would be internal damage, and it would certainly compromise their mission. He tightened his grip on the cable and didn't look down again. When they had climbed up the last 3 floors, they braced themselves in the corners by the closed elevator door. Kelly and Fred snaked up the cable after them. They braced in the far corners to overlap their fields of fire. Linda came up last. She climbed as far as she could, hooked her foot on a cross brace, and hung upside down. John held up 3 fingers, 2, then 1, and then he and Sam silently pulled open the elevator doors. There were 5 guards standing in the room. They wore light body armor and helmets and carried older model HMG-38 rifles. 2 of them turned. Kelly, Fred, and Linda opened fire. The walnut paneling behind the guards became pockmarked with bullet holes and was splattered with blood. The team slid inside the room, moving quickly and quietly. Sam policed the guards' weapons. There were 2 doors. One led to a balcony. The other featured a peephole. Kelly checked the balcony, then whispered over the channel in their helmets, "This overlooks the alley between the buildings. No activity." John checked the nav marker. The blue triangles flashed a position directly behind the other door. Sam and Fred flanked the door. John couldn't get a reading on motion or thermal. The walls were shielded. There were too many unknowns and not enough time. The situation wasn't ideal. They knew there were at least 3 men inside, the ones who had carried the crate upstairs, and there might be more guards, and to complicate the situation, their target had to be taken alive. John kicked the door in. He took in the entire situation at a glance. He was standing on the threshold of a sumptuous apartment. There was a wet bar boasting shelves of amber-filled bottles. A large round bed dominated the corner, decorated with shimmering silk sheets. Windows on all sides had sheer white curtains. John's helmet automatically compensated for the glare. Red carpet covered the floor. The crate with the cigars and champagne sat in the center of the room. It was black and armored, sealed tight against the vacuum of space. There were 3 men standing behind the armored crate, and 1 man crouched behind them. Colonel Robert Watts, their package. John didn't have a clear shot. If he missed, he could hit the colonel. The 3 men, however, didn't have that problem. They fired. John dove to his left. He caught 3 rounds in his side, knocking the breath from his body. 1 bullet penetrated his black suit. He felt it ping off his ribs, and pain slashed through him like a red-hot razor. He ignored the wound and rolled to his feet. He had a clear line of fire. He squeezed the trigger once. A 3-round burst caught the center guard in the forehead. Sam and Fred wheeled around the doorframe, Sam high, Fred low. Their silenced weapons coughed, and the remaining pair of guards went down. Watts remained behind the crate. He brandished his pistol.
"Stop!"
he screamed.
"My men are coming! You think I'm alone? You're all dead! Drop your weapons!"
John crawled to the wet bar and crouched there. He willed the pain inside his stomach to go away. He signaled Sam and Fred and held up 2 fingers, then pointed the fingers over his head. Sam and Fred fired a burst of rounds over Watts. He ducked. John vaulted over the bar and leapt onto his quarry. He grabbed the pistol and wrenched it out of his hand, breaking the man's index finger and thumb. John snaked his arm around Watts's neck and choked the struggling man into near unconsciousness. Kelly and Linda entered. Kelly took out a syringe and injected Watts. Enough polypseudomorphine to keep him sedated for the better part of a day. Fred fell back to cover the elevator. Sam entered and crouched by the windows, watching the street below for any signs of trouble. Kelly went to John and peeled back his black suit. Her gloves were slick with his blood. "The bullet is still inside," she said, and bit her lower lip. "There's a lot of internal bleeding. Hang on." She dug a tiny bottle from her belt and inserted the nozzle into the bullet hole. "This might sting a little." The self-sealing biofoam filled John's abdominal cavity. It also stung like 100 ants crawling through his innards. She pulled the bottle out and taped up the hole. "You're good for a few hours," she said, and then gave him a hand up. John felt shaky, but he'd make it. The foam would keep him from bleeding to death and stave off the shock. For a while, at least. "Incoming vehicles!" Sam announced. 6 men entering the building, 2 taking up position outside, but just the front. "Get our package inside that crate and seal it up," John ordered. He left the room, got his duffel, and went to the balcony. He secured a rope and tossed it down 12 stories into the alley. He rappelled down, took a second to scan the alley for threats, then clicked his throat mic once, the all-clear signal. Kelly snapped a descent rig on the crate and pushed it off the balcony. It zipped down the line and thudded to a halt at the bottom. A moment later, the rest of the team glided down the rope. They quickly donned their coveralls. Sam and Fred carried the crate as they entered the adjacent building. They exited on the street a half-block down and walked as quickly as they could back to the docks. Dozens of uniformed men ran from the dock toward the city. No one challenged them. They re-entered the now deserted public showers. "Everyone check your seals," John said. "Sam, you go ring the doorbell. Meet us on the dropship." Sam nodded and sprinted out of the building, both packs of C-12 looped around his shoulder. John took out the panic button. He triggered the green mode transmission and tossed it into an empty locker. If they didn't make it out, at least the UNSC fleet would know where to find the rebel base. "Your suit is breached," Kelly reminded John. "We'd better get to the ship now before Sam sets off his fireworks." Linda and Fred checked the seals on the crate, then carried it out. Kelly took point, and John brought up the rear. They boarded the Pelican dropship, and John sized up her armaments. Dented and charred armor, a pair of old, out-of-date 40mm chain guns. The rocket pods had been removed. Not much of a warhorse. There was a flash of lightning at the far end of the dock. The thunder roiled through the deck, and then through John's stomach. While John watched, a gaping hole materialized in the airlock door amid a cloud of smoke and shattered metal. Black space loomed beyond. With an ear-splitting roar, the atmosphere held in the docks abruptly transformed into a hurricane. People, crates, and debris were blasted out of the ragged tear. John pulled himself inside the dropship and prepared to seal the main hatch. He watched as emergency doors descended over the breached airlock. There was a second explosion, and the drop door paused, then fell and clattered to the deck, crushing a light transport vessel underneath. Behind them, large bay doors closed, sealing the docks off from the city. Dozens of workers still on the docks ran for their lives, but didn't make it. Sam sprinted across the deck, perfectly safe inside his sealed black suit. He cycled through the Pelican's emergency airlock. "Back door's open," he said with a grin. Kelly fired up the engines. The Pelican lifted, maneuvered through the dock, and then out through the blasted hole and into open space. She pushed the throttle to maximum burn. Behind them, the insurgent base looked like any other rock in the asteroid belt, but this rock was venting atmosphere and starting to rotate erratically. After 5 minutes at full power, Kelly eased the engines back. "We'll hit the extraction point in 2 hours," she said. "Check on our prisoner," John said. Sam popped open the crate. "The seal's held. Watts is still alive and has a steady pulse," he said. "Good," John grunted. He winced as the throbbing pain in his side increased. Something bothering you? Kelly asked. How's that biofilm holding up?
It's fine, he said without even looking at the hole in his side. I'll make it.
He knew he should feel elated, but instead he just felt tired. Something didn't sit right about the operation. He wondered about all the dead dock workers and civilians back there. None of them were designated targets, and yet weren't they all rebels on that asteroid? On the other hand, it was like the chief said. He had followed his orders, completed his mission, and gotten his people out alive. What more did he want? John stuffed his doubts deep in the back of his mind. "Nothing's wrong," he said, and squeezed Kelly's shoulder. John smiled. "What could be wrong? We won." Chapter 11. 0600 hours, November 2nd, 2525, Military Calendar. Epsilon Eridani System. Reach UNSC Military Complex. Planet Reach. John wondered who had died. Before now, there had only been one reason for the Spartans to be called to muster in their dress uniforms: funeral detail. The Purple Heart, awarded to him after his last mission, glistened on his chest. He made sure it was polished to a high sheen. It stood out against the black wool of his dress jacket. Occasionally, John would look at it and make sure it was still there. He sat in the third row of the amphitheater and faced the center platform. The other Spartans sat quietly on the concentric rings of risers. Spotlights flicked on the empty stage. He had been in Reach's secure briefing chamber before. This is where Dr. Halsey had told him they were going to be soldiers. This is where his life had changed, and he had been given a purpose. Chief Mendez entered the room and marched to the center platform. He too wore his black dress uniform as well. His chest was covered with silver and bronze stars, 3 Purple Hearts, the Red Legion of Honor Award, and a rainbow of campaign ribbons. He had recently shaved his head. The Spartans rose and stood at attention. Dr. Halsey entered. She looked older to John. The wrinkles at the corners of her eyes and mouth were pronounced, streaks of gray in her dark hair, but her blue eyes were as sharp as ever. She wore gray slacks, a black shirt, and her glasses hung about her neck on a gold chain.
"Admiral on deck,"
Mendez announced. They all snapped straighter. A man 10 years Dr. Halsey's senior strode to the stage. His short silver hair looked like a steel helmet. His gait had a strange lope to it, what crewmen called spacewalk, from spending too much time in microgravity. He wore a simple, unadorned black dress UNSC uniform, no medals or campaign ribbons. The insignia on the forearm of his jacket, however, was unmistakable: the single gold star of a rear admiral.
"At ease, Spartans," he said. "I'm Admiral Stanforth."
The Spartans took their seats in unison. Dust swirled on stage and collected into a robed figure. Its face was obscured within the shadows of its hood. John could discern no hands at the end of his sleeves.
"And this is Beowulf,"
Admiral Stanforth said, as he gestured to the ghostly creature. Stanforth's voice was calm, but distaste was evident on his face.
"He is our AI attaché with the Office of Naval Intelligence."
He turned away from the AI.
"We have several important issues to cover this morning, so let's get started."
The lights dimmed. An amber sun appeared in the center of the room, with 3 planets in close orbit.
"This is Harvest," he said. "Population of approximately 3 million. Although on the periphery of UNSC-controlled space, this world is one of our more productive and peaceful colonies."
The holographic view zoomed in on the surface of the world and showed grasslands and forests and 1,000 lakes swarming with the schools of fish.
"As of military calendar February 3, at 14:23 hours, the Harvest orbital platform made long-range radar contact with this object."
A blurry outline appeared over the stage.
"Spectroscopic analysis proved inconclusive,"
Admiral Stanforth said.
"The object is constructed of material unknown to us."
A molecular absorption graph appeared on the side screen, spikes and jagged lines indicating the relative proportions of elements. Beowulf raised a cloaked arm, and the image darkened. The words "classified, eyes only" appeared over the blackened data. Admiral Stanforth shot a glare at the AI.
"Contact with Harvest," he continued, "was lost shortly thereafter. The Colonial Military Administration sent the scout ship Argo to investigate. That ship arrived in system on April 20th, but other than a brief transmission to confirm their exit slipstream position, no further reports were made. In response, Fleet Command assembled a battle group to investigate. The group consisted of the destroyer Heracles, commanded by Captain Vererde, as well as the frigates Arabia and Vostok. They entered the Harvest system on October 7th and discovered the following."
The holograph of the planet Harvest changed. The lush fields and rolling hills transformed, morphing into a cratered, barren desert. Thin gray sunlight reflected off a glassy crust. Heat wavered from the surface. Isolated regions glowed red.
"This is what was left of the colony."
The Admiral paused for a moment to stare at the image, and then continued.
"We assume that all inhabitants are lost."
3 million lives lost. John couldn't fathom the raw force it had taken to kill so many. For a moment he was torn between horror and envy. He glanced at the purple heart pinned to his chest and remembered his lost comrades. How did one simple bullet wound compare with so many wasted lives? He was suddenly no longer proud of the decoration.
"And this is what the Heracles battle group found in orbit," Admiral Stanforth told them.
The blurry outline that was still visible, hanging in the air, sharpened into crisp focus. It looked smooth and organic, and the hull possessed an odd, opalescent sheen. It looked more like the carapace of an exotic insect than the metal hull of a spacecraft. Recessed into the aft section were pods that pulsed with a purple-white glow. The prow of the craft was swollen like the head of a whale. John thought it possessed an odd, predatory beauty.
"The unidentified vessel," the Admiral said, "launched an immediate attack against our forces."
Blue flashes strobed from the ship. Red motes of light then appeared along its hull. Bolts of energy coalesced into a fiery smear against the blackness of space. The deadly flashes of light impacted on the Arabia, splashed across its hull. Its meter of armor plating instantly boiled away, and a plume of ignited atmosphere burst from the breach in the ship's hull.
"Those were pulse lasers," Admiral Stanforth explained, "and, if this record is to be believed, some kind of self-guided superheated plasma weapon."
The Heracles and Vostok launched salvos of missiles toward the craft. The enemy's lasers shot half before they reached their target. The balance of the missiles impacted, detonated into blossoms of fire that quickly faded. The strange ship shimmered with a semi-transparent silver coating, which then vanished.
"They also seem to have some reflective energy shield." Admiral Stanforth took a deep breath, and his features hardened into a mask of grim resolve. "The Vostok and Arabia were lost with all hands. The Heracles jumped out of the system, but due to the damage she sustained, it took several weeks for Captain Vererde to make it back to Reach. These weapons and defensive systems are currently beyond our technology. Therefore, this craft is of non-human origin." He paused, then added, "The product of race with technology far in advance of our own."
A murmur buzzed through the chamber.
"We have, of course, developed a number of first contact scenarios," the Admiral continued, "and Captain Vererde followed our established protocols. We had hoped that contact with a new race would be peaceful. Obviously, this was not the case. The alien vessel did not open fire until our task force attempted to initiate communications."
He paused, considering his words.
"Fragments of the enemy's transmissions were intercepted," he continued. "A few words have been translated. We believe they call themselves the Covenant. However, before opening fire, the alien ship broadcast the following message in the clear." He gestured at Beowulf, who nodded. A moment later, a voice thundered from the amphitheater speakers. John stiffened in his seat when he heard it. The voice from the speakers sounded odd, artificial, strangely calm and formal, but laden with rage and menace. "Your destruction is the will of the gods, and we are their instrument." John was awestruck. He stood. "Yes, Spartan," Stanforth said.
"Sir, is this a translation?"
"No," the Admiral replied. "They broadcast this to us in our language. We believe they used some kind of translation system to prepare the message, but it means they've been studying us for some time." John took his seat. "As of November 1, the UNSC has been ordered to full alert," Stanforth said. "Vice Admiral Preston Cole is mobilizing the largest fleet action in human history to retake the Harvest system and confront this new threat. Their transmission made one thing perfectly clear. They're looking for a fight." Only years of military discipline kept John rooted to his seat. Otherwise he would have stood up and asked to volunteer on the spot. He would have given anything to go and fight. This was the threat he and the other Spartans had been training for all their lives. He was certain of it. Not scattered rebels, pirates, or political dissidents. "Because of this UNSC-wide mobilization," Admiral Stanforth continued, "your training schedule will be accelerated to its final phase, Project Mjolnir." He stepped away from the podium and clasped his hands behind his back. "To that end, I'm afraid I have another unpleasant announcement." He turned to the chief. "Chief Petty Officer Mendez will be departing us to train the next group of Spartans. Chief?" John grabbed the edge of the riser. Chief Mendez had always been there for them, the only constant in the universe. Admiral Stanforth might as well have told him that Epsilon Eridani was leaving the Reach system. The chief stepped to the podium and clasped its edges. "Recruits," he said, "soon your training will be complete, and you will graduate to the rank of Petty Officer Second Class in the UNSC. One of the first things you will learn is that change is part of a soldier's life. You will make and lose friends. You will move. This is part of the job." He looked to his audience. His dark eyes rested on each one of them. He nodded, seemingly satisfied with what he saw. "The Spartans are the finest group of soldiers I have ever encountered," he said. "It has been a privilege to train you. Never forget what I've tried to teach you. Duty, honor, and sacrifice for the greater good of humanity are the qualities that make you the best." He was silent for a moment, searching for more words. But finding none, he stood at attention and saluted. "Attention!" John barked. The Spartans rose as one and saluted the chief. "Dismissed, Spartans," Chief Mendez said, "and good luck." He finished his salute. The Spartans snapped down their arms. They hesitated, and then reluctantly filed out of the amphitheater. John stayed behind. He had to talk to Chief Mendez. Dr. Halsey spoke briefly with the chief and the admiral, then she and the admiral left together. Beowulf backed toward the far wall and faded away like a ghost. The chief gathered his hat, spotted John, and walked to him. He nodded to the hologram of the scorched colony, Harvest, still rotating in the air. "One final lesson, Petty Officer," he said. "What tactical options do you have when attacking a stronger opponent?"
"Sir," John said, "there are two options. Attack swiftly and with full force at their weakest point. Take them out quickly before they have a chance to respond."
"Good," he said. "And the other option?"
"Fall back," John replied. "Engage in guerrilla actions or get reinforcements."
The chief sighed. "Those are the correct answers," he said. "But it may not be enough to be correct this time. Sit, please." John sat, and the chief settled next to him on the riser. "There's a third option." The chief turned his hat over in his hands. "An option that others may eventually consider."
"Sir?"
"Surrender," the chief whispered. "That, however, is never an option for the likes of you and me. We don't have the luxury of backing down."
He glanced up at Harvest, a glittering ball of glass.
"And I doubt that an enemy like this will let us surrender."
"I think I understand, sir."
"Make sure you do. And make sure you don't let anyone else give up."
He gazed into the shadows beyond the center platform.
"Project Mjolnir will make the Spartans into something new. Something I could never forge them into. I can't fully explain. That damned O&I spook is still here listening. Just trust Dr. Halsey."
The chief dug into his jacket pocket.
"I was hoping to see you before they shipped me out. I have something for you."
He set a small metal disc on the riser between them.
"When you first came here," the chief said, "you fought the trainers when they took this away from you. Broke a few fingers, as I recall."
His chiseled features cracked into a rare smile. John picked up the disc and examined it. It was an ancient silver coin. He flipped it between his fingers.
"It has an eagle on one side," Mendez said. "That bird is like you, fast and deadly."
John closed his fingers around the quarter. "Thank you, sir." He wanted to say that he was strong and fast because the chief had made him so. He wanted to tell him that he was ready to defend humanity against this new threat. He wanted to say that without the chief, he would have no purpose, no integrity, and no duty to perform. But John didn't have the words. He just sat there. Mendez stood.
"It has been an honor to serve with you."
Instead of saluting, he held out his hand. John got to his feet. He took the chief's hand and they shook. It took a great deal of effort. Every instinct screamed at him to salute.
"Goodbye," Chief Mendez said.
He turned briskly on his heel and strode from the room. John never saw him again. Chapter 12. 1750 hours, November 27, 2525, military calendar. UNSC frigate Commonwealth, en route to the UNSC Damascus Materials Testing Facility. Planet Chi CD4. The view screen in the bunk room of the UNSC frigate Commonwealth clicked on as the ship entered normal space. Ice particles showered the external camera and gave the distant yellow sun, Chi Ceti, a ghostly ring. John watched and continued to ponder the word Mjolnir as they sped in system. He had looked it up in the education database. Mjolnir was the hammer used by the Norse god of thunder. Project Mjolnir had to be some kind of weapon. At least he hoped it was. They needed something to fight the Covenant. If it was a weapon, though, why was it here at the Damascus testing facility, on the very edge of UNSC-controlled space? He had only even heard of this system 24 hours ago. He turned and surveyed the squad. Although this bunk room had 100 beds, the Spartans still clustered together, playing cards, polishing boots, reading, exercising. Sam sparred with Kelly, although she had to slow herself down considerably to give him a chance. John was reminded that he didn't like being on starships. The lack of control was disturbing. If he wasn't stuck in the freezer, the starship's cramped, unpleasant cryochamber, he was left waiting and wondering what their next mission would be. During the last 3 weeks, the Spartans had handled a variety of minor missions for Dr. Halsey. Tying up loose ends, she had called it. Putting down rebel factions on Jericho 7, removing a black market bazaar near the Roosevelt military base. Each mission had brought them closer to the Chi Ceti system. John had made sure every member of his squad had participated in these missions. They had performed flawlessly. There had been no losses. Chief Mendez would have been proud of them.
"Spartan 117, Dr. Halsey's voice blared over the loudspeaker. "Report to the bridge immediately."
John snapped to attention and keyed the intercom. "Yes, ma'am." He turned to Sam. "Get everyone ready in case we're needed. On the double."
"Affirmative," Sam said. "You heard the petty officer. Dog those cards. Get into uniform, soldier."
John double-timed it to the elevator and punched the code for the bridge. Gravity faded out and then back again as the elevator passed between rotating sections of the ship. The doors parted and he stepped onto the bridge. Every wall had a screen. Some showed stars and the distant red smear of a nebula. Other screens displayed the fusion reactor status and spectrums of microwave broadcasts in the system. A brass railing ringed the center of the bridge, and within sat 4 junior lieutenants at their stations: navigation, weapons, communications, and ship operations. John halted and saluted Captain Wallace, then nodded to Dr. Halsey. Captain Wallace stood with his right arm crooked behind his back. His left arm was missing from the elbow down. John remained saluting until the captain returned the gesture.
"Over here, please," Dr. Halsey said. "I want you to see this."
John walked across the rubberized deck and gave his full attention to the screen Dr. Halsey and Captain Wallace were scrutinizing. It displayed deconvoluted radar signals. It looked like tangled yarn to John.
"There,"
Dr. Halsey pointed to a blip on the screen.
"It's there again."
Captain Wallace stroked his dark beard, thinking, then said,
"That puts our ghost at 80 million kilometers. Even if it were a ship, it would take a full hour to get within weapons range. And besides," he waved at the screen, "it's gone again."
"May I suggest that we go to battle stations, Captain?" Dr. Halsey told him.
"I don't see the point,"
he said condescendingly. The captain was clearly less than pleased about having a civilian on his bridge.
"We haven't let this be widely known," she said, "but when the aliens were first detected at Harvest, they appeared at extreme range, and then they were suddenly much closer."
"An intra-system jump?" John asked. Dr. Halsey smiled at him.
"Correctly surmised, Spartan."
"That's not possible," Captain Wallace remarked. "Slipstream space can't be navigated that accurately."
"You mean we cannot navigate with that kind of accuracy?" she said.
The captain clenched and unclenched his jaw. He clicked the intercom.
"General quarters, all hands to battle stations. Seal bulkheads. I repeat, all hands battle stations. This is not a drill. Reactors to 90%. Come about to course 125."
The bridge lights darkened to a red hue. The deck rumbled beneath John's boots, and the entire ship tilted as it changed heading. Pressure doors slammed shut and sealed John on the bridge. The Commonwealth stabilized on her new heading, and Dr. Halsey crossed her arms. She leaned over and whispered to John,
"We'll be using the Commonwealth's dropship to go to the testing facility on Chi-Seti 4. We have to get to Project Mjolnir."
She turned back and watched the radar screen.
"Before they do. So get the others ready."
"Yes, ma'am." John keyed the intercom. "Sam, muster the squad in Bay Alpha. I want that Pelican loaded and ready for drop in 15 minutes. "We'll have it done in 10, Sam replied. "Faster if those long-sword interceptor pilots get out of our way." John would have given anything to be below decks with the others. He felt as if he were being left behind. The radar screen flashed with blobs of eerie green light, almost as if the space around the Commonwealth were boiling. The collision alarm sounded.
"Brace for impact,"
Captain Wallace said. He laced his arm around the brass railing. John grabbed an emergency handhold on the wall. Something appeared 3,000 kilometers off the Commonwealth's prow. It was a sleek oval with a single seam running along its lateral edge from stem to stern. Tiny lights winked on and off along its hull. A faint purple-tinged glow emitted from the tail. The ship was only a third the size of the Commonwealth.
"A Covenant ship,"
Dr. Halsey said, and she involuntarily backed away from the view screens. Captain Wallace scowled.
"Comm officer, send a signal to Chi-Seti. See if they can send us some reinforcements."
"Aye, sir." Blue flashes flickered along the hull of the alien ship, so bright that even filtered through the external camera, they still made John's eyes water. The outer hull of the Commonwealth sizzled and popped.
3 screens filled with static.
"Pulse lasers!"
the lieutenant at the op station screamed.
"Communication dish destroyed! Armor in sections 3 and 4 at 25%! Hull breach in section 3! Sealing now!"
The lieutenant swiveled in his seat. Sweat beaded on his forehead.
"Ship AI core memory overloaded," he said.
With the AI offline, the ship could still fire weapons and navigate through slipstream space, but John knew it would take more time to make jump calculations.
"Come to heading 030, declination 180, Captain Wallace ordered. "Arm Archer missile pods A through F, and give me a firing solution."
"Aye, aye," the navigation and weapons officer said.
"A through F pods armed."
They furiously tapped away on their keypads. Seconds ticked by.
"Firing solution ready, sir." "Fire!" "Pods A through F firing."
The Commonwealth had 26 pods, each loaded with 30 Archer high-explosive missiles. On screen, pods A through F opened and launched. 180 plumes of rocket exhaust that traced a path from the Commonwealth to the alien ship. The enemy changed course, rotated so that the top of the ship faced the incoming missiles. It then moved straight up at an alarming speed. The Archer missiles altered their trajectory to track the ship, but half their number streaked past the target, clean misses. The others impacted. Fire covered the skin of the alien ship.
"Good work, Lieutenant,"
Captain Wallace said, and he clapped the young officer on the shoulder. Dr. Halsey frowned and stared at the screen.
"No,"
she whispered.
"Wait."
The fire flared, then dimmed. The skin of the alien ship rippled like heat wavering off a hot road in the summer. It fluttered with a metallic silver sheen, then brilliant white, and the fire faded, revealing the ship beneath. It was completely undamaged.
"Energy shields,"
Dr. Halsey muttered. She tapped her lower lip, thinking.
"Even ships this small have energy shielding." "Lieutenant," the captain barked at the nav officer, "cut main engines and fire maneuvering thrusters. Rotate and track so that we're pointing at that thing." "Aye, aye, sir."
The distant rumbling of the Commonwealth's main engines dimmed and stopped, and she turned about. Her inertia kept the ship speeding toward the testing facility, now flying backward.
"What are you doing, Captain?"
Dr. Halsey asked.
"Arm the Mac," Captain Wallace told the weapons officer. "A heavy round."
John understood. Turning your back to an enemy only gave them an advantage. The MAC, Magnetic Accelerator Cannon, was the Commonwealth's main weapon. It fired a super-dense ferric tungsten shell. The tremendous mass and velocity of the projectile obliterated most ships on impact. Unlike the Archer missiles, a MAC round was an unguided projectile. The firing solution had to be perfect in order to hit the target. Not an easy thing to do when both ships were moving rapidly.
"MAC capacitors charging,"
the weapons officer announced. The Covenant ship turned its side toward the Commonwealth.
"Yes," the captain murmured. "Give me a bigger target."
Pinpoints of blue light glowed and then flared along the alien hull. The tactical view screens on the nose of the Commonwealth went dead. John heard sizzling overhead, then the muffled thumps of explosive decompressions.
"More pulse laser hits," the ops officer reported. "Armor in section 3 through 7 down to 4 centimeters. Navigation dish destroyed. Hull breaches on decks 2, 5, and 9. We have a leak in the port fuel tanks."
The lieutenant's hand shakily danced over the controls.
"Pumping fuel to starboard reverse tanks. Sealing sections."
John shifted on his feet. He had to move, act. Standing here, unable to get his squad, not doing anything, was counter to every fiber
"MAC
of
at
his
100%!"
the weapons officer shouted.
"Ready to fire!" "Fire!" Captain Wallace ordered.
The lights on the bridge dimmed and the Commonwealth shuddered. The MAC bolt launched through space, a red-hot metal slug moving at 30,000 meters per second. The Covenant ship's engines flared to life, and the ship veered away. Too late. The heavy round closed and slammed into the target's prow. The Covenant ship reeled backward through space. Its energy shield shimmered and glowed lightning bright, then flickered, dimmed, and went out. The bridge crew let out a victory cheer. Except Dr. Halsey. John watched the view screen as she adjusted the camera controls and zoomed in on the Covenant ship. The vessel's erratic spinning slowed and it came to a stop. The ship's nose was crumpled and atmosphere vented into vacuum. Tiny fires flickered inside. The ship slowly came about and started back toward them, gaining speed. "It should have been destroyed," she whispered. Tiny red blobs appeared on the hull of the Covenant ship. They glowed and intensified and drifted together, collecting along the lateral line of the craft. Captain Wallace said,
"Make ready another heavy round."
"Aye, aye, sir," the weapons officer said. "Charge at 30%. Firing solution online, sir." "No," Dr. Halsey said. "Evasive maneuvers, Captain, now!"
"I won't have my command second-guessed, ma'am."
The captain turned to face her.
"And with respect, Doctor, second-guessed by someone with no combat experience."
He stiffened and placed his hand behind his back.
"I cannot have you removed from the bridge because the bulkheads are sealed. But another outburst like that, Doctor, and I will have you gagged."
John shot a quick glance to Dr. Halsey. Her face flushed. He couldn't tell from shame or rage. "Mac at 50% charge!" The red light continued to collect along the lateral line of the Covenant ship until it was a solid band. It brightened. 80% charge! "They're turning, sir," the nav officer announced. "She's coming to starboard." 95% charge, 100, the weapons officer announced.
"Send them to Hades, Lieutenant. Fire!"
The lights dimmed again. The Commonwealth shuddered, and a bolt of thunder and fire tore through the blackness. The Covenant ship stood its ground. The blood-red light that had pooled on its lateral line burst forth, streaked toward the Commonwealth, passing the Mac round a mere kilometer away. The red light glowed and pulsed, almost as if it were liquid. Its edges roiled and fluttered. It elongated into a teardrop of ruby light 5 meters long.
"Evasive maneuvers!" Captain Wallace cried. "Emergency thrusters to port!"
The Commonwealth slowly moved out of the trajectory path of the Covenant's energy weapon. The Mac round struck the Covenant vessel amidships. Its shield shimmered and bubbled, then disappeared. The Mac round punched through the craft and sent it spinning out of control. The inbound ball of light moved too. It started tracking the Commonwealth.
"Engines, full power astern!"
the captain ordered. The Commonwealth rumbled and slowed. The light should have sped past them. Instead, it sharply arced and struck her port amidships. The air filled with a popping and sizzling. The Commonwealth listed to starboard, then rolled completely over and continued to tumble.
"Stabilize!" the captain cried. "Starboard thrusters!"
"Fire reported in sections 1 through 20, the ops officer said, panic creeping into his voice. "Decks 2 through 7 in section 1 melted, sir. They're gone." It grew noticeably hotter on the bridge. Sweat beaded on John's back and trickled down his spine. He had never felt so helpless. Were his teammates below decks alive or dead? "All port armor destroyed. Decks 2 through 5 and sections 3, 4, and 5 are now out of contact, sir. It's burning through us." Captain Wallace stood without saying a word. He stared at their one remaining view screen. Dr. Halsey stepped forward. "Respectfully, Captain, I suggest that you alert the crew to get on respirator packs. Give them 30 seconds, then vent the atmosphere on all decks except the bridge." The comm officer looked to the captain.
"Do it," the captain said. "Sound the alert."
"Deck 13 destroyed," the ops officer announced. "Fire is getting close to the reactor. Hull structure starting to buckle."
"Vent atmosphere now," Captain Wallace ordered.
"Aye, aye," the ops officer replied. There was the sound of thumping through the hull, then nothing. "Fire is dying out," the ops officer said. "Hull temperature cooling, stabilizing."
"What the hell did they hit us with?" Captain Wallace demanded.
"Plasma," Dr. Halsey replied. "But not any plasma we know. They can actually guide its trajectory through space without any detectable mechanism. Amazing." "Captain," the navigator said,
Alien ship is pursuing!
The Covenant vessel, a red-rimmed hole punched through its center, turned and started toward the Commonwealth.
How?
Captain Wallace said unbelievingly. He quickly regained his wits.
Ready another Mac Heavy round!
The weapons officer slowly said, Mac system destroyed, Captain.
We're sitting ducks, then,
the captain murmured. Dr. Halsey leaned against the brass railing. Not quite. The Commonwealth carries 3 nuclear missiles, correct, Captain?
A detonation this close would destroy us as well.
She frowned and cupped her hand to her chin, thinking. Excuse me, sir, John said. The aliens' tactics thus far have been unnecessarily vicious, like those of an animal. They didn't have to take that second Mac round while they fired at us. But they wanted to position themselves to fire. In my opinion, sir, they would stop and engage anything that challenged them. The captain looked at Dr. Halsey. She shrugged and then nodded. The Longsword interceptors? Captain Wallace turned his back to them and covered his face with his one hand. He sighed, nodded, and clicked on the intercom.
Longsword Squadron Delta, this is the captain. Get your ships into the black, boys, and engage the enemy ship. I need you to buy us some time.
Roger that, sir. We're ready to launch. On our way.
Turn us around, the captain told the nav officer. Give me best speed on a vector toward Chi-Ceti 4 orbit.
Coolant leaks in the reactor, sir, the ops officer said. We can push the engines to 30%, no more.
Give me 50%, he said. He turned to the weapons officer. I'm one of our Shiva warheads. Set proximity fuse to 100 meters.
Yes, sir.
The Commonwealth spun about. John felt the change in his stomach, and he tightened his grip on the railing. The spinning slowed, stopped, then the ship accelerated.
Reactor redlining, the ops officer reported. Meltdown in 25 seconds.
Over the speakers there was a crackle, a hiss of static, then...
Longsword interceptors engaging the enemy, sir.
On the remaining aft camera there were flickers of light, the cold blue strobes of Covenant energy weapons, and the red-orange fireballs of the Longsword's missiles. Launch the missile, the captain said.
Meltdown in 10 seconds. Missile away!
A plume of exhaust divided the darkness of space.
5 seconds to meltdown, the ops officer said. 4, 3, 2...
Shunt drive plasma to space, the captain ordered. Cut power to all systems. The Covenant ship was silhouetted for a split second by pure white. Then the view screen snapped off. The bridge lights went dead. John could see everything, though. The bridge officers, Dr. Halsey as she clutched onto the railing, and Captain Wallace as he stood and saluted the pilots he had just sent to die. The hull of the Commonwealth rumbled and pinged as the shock wave enveloped them. It grew louder, a subsonic roar that shook John to his bones. The noise seemed to go on forever in the darkness. It faded. Then it was completely silent. "Power us back up," the captain said. "Slowly. Give me 10% from the reactors if we can manage." The bridge lights came on, dimly, but they worked. "Report," the captain ordered.
All sensors offline, the op officer said. Resetting backup computer. Hang on. Scanning now. Lots of debris. It's hot back there. All Longsword interceptors vaporized.
He looked up. The color drained from his face.
Covenant ship intact, sir.
"No!" the captain said, and made a fist.
It's moving off, though, the op officer said with a visible sigh of relief. Very slowly.
"What does it take to destroy one of those things?" the captain whispered.
We don't know if our weapons can destroy them, Dr. Halsey said. But at least we know we can slow them down.
The captain stood straighter. "Best speed to the Damascus testing facility. We will execute a flyby orbit, then proceed to a point 20 million kilometers distant to make repairs."
Captain, Dr. Halsey said. A flyby?
I have orders to get you to the facility and retrieve whatever Section 3 is stowed there, ma'am. As we fly by, a dropship will take you and your—"
He glanced at John.
"Crew planetside. If the Covenant ship returns, we will be the bait to lure them away."
"I understand, Captain."
"We'll rendezvous in orbit no later than 1900 hours.
Dr. Halsey turned to John. "We need to hurry. We don't have much time, and there is a great deal I need to show the Spartans."
"Yes, ma'am,"
John said. He took a long look at the bridge and hoped he never had to return. Chapter 13. 1845 hours, November 27, 2525, Military Calendar. UNSC Damascus Materials Testing Facility. Planet Chi Ceti 4. How far down was the testing facility? John and the other Spartans had been confined to a freight elevator for 15 minutes, and the entire time it had been rapidly descending into the depths of Chi Ceti 4. The last place John wanted to be was in another confined space. The doors finally slid open, and they emerged in what appeared to be a well-lit hangar. The far end had an obstacle course set up with walls, trenches, dummy targets, and barbed wire. 3 technicians and at least a dozen AI figures were busy in the center of the room. John had seen AIs before, one at a time. Deja had once told the Spartans that there were technical reasons why AIs couldn't be in the same place at the same time. But here were many ghostly figures, a mermaid, a samurai warrior, and one made entirely of bright light with comets trailing in her wake. Dr. Halsey cleared her throat. The technicians turned. The AIs vanished. John had been so focused on the holograms that he hadn't noticed the 40 plexiglass mannequins set up in rows. On each was a suit of armor. The armor reminded John of the exoskeletons he had seen during training, but much less bulky, more compact. He stepped closer to one and saw that the suit actually had many layers. The outer layer reflected the overhead lights with a faint green-gold iridescence. It covered the groin, outer thighs, knees, shins, chest, shoulders, and forearms. There was a helmet and an integrated power pack, much smaller than standard marine battery sacks. Underneath were intermeshed layers of matte black metal. "Project Mjolnir," Dr. Halsey said. She snapped her fingers, and an exploded holographic schematic of the armor appeared next to her. "The armor's shell is a multi-layer alloy of remarkable strength. We recently added a refractive coating to disperse incoming energy weapon attacks, to counter our new enemies." She pointed inside the schematic. "Each battlesuit also has a gel-filled layer to regulate temperature. This layer can reactively change in density. Against the skin of the operator, there is a moisture-absorbing cloth suit, and biomonitors that constantly adjust the suit's temperature and fit. There's also an onboard computer that interfaces with your standard-issue neural implant." She gestured and the schematic collapsed, so that it only displayed the outer layers. As the image changed, John glimpsed vein-like microcapillaries, a dense sandwich of optical crystal, a circulating pump, even what looked like a miniature fusion cell in the backpack. "Most importantly," Dr. Halsey said, "the armor's inner structure is composed of a new reactive metal liquid crystal. It is amorphous, yet fractally scales and amplifies force. In simplified terms, the armor doubles the wearer's strength and enhances the reaction speed of a normal human by a factor of 5. She waved her hand through the hologram. "There is one problem, however. This system is so reactive that our previous tests with unaugmented volunteers ended in—" She searched for the right word. "Failure." She nodded to one of the technicians. A flat video appeared in the air. It showed a Marine officer, a lieutenant, being fitted with a Mjolnir armor. "Power is on," someone said from off-screen. "Move your right arm, please." The soldier's arm blurred forward with incredible speed. The Marine's stoic expression collapsed into shock, surprise and pain as his arm shattered. He convulsed, shuddered, and screamed. As he jerked in pain, John could hear the sounds of bones breaking. The man's own agony-induced spasms were killing him. Halsey waved the video away.
"Normal humans don't have the reaction time or strength required to drive this system," she explained. "You do. Your enhanced musculature and the metal and ceramic layers that have been bonded to your skeleton should be enough to allow you to harness the armor's power. There has been insufficient computer modeling, however. There will be some risk. You'll have to move very slowly and deliberately until you get a feel for the armor and how it works. It cannot be powered down, nor can the response be scaled back. Do you understand?"
"Yes, ma'am," the Spartans answered.
"Questions?"
John raised his hand. "When do we get to try them, Doctor?"
"Right now," she said. "Volunteers?"
Every Spartan raised a hand. Dr. Halsey allowed herself a tiny smile. She surveyed them, and finally she turned to John.
"You've always been lucky, John," she said. "Let's go."
He stepped forward. The technicians fitted him as the others watched, and the pieces of the Mjolnir system were assembled around his body. It was like a giant three-dimensional puzzle.
"Please breathe normally," Dr. Halsey told him, "but otherwise remain absolutely still."
John held himself as motionless as he could. The armor shifted and melded to the contours of his form. It was like a second skin, and much lighter than he had thought it would be. It heated, then cooled, then matched the temperature of his body. If he closed his eyes, he wouldn't have known he was encased. They set the helmet over his head. Health monitors, motion sensors, suit status indicators pulsed into life. A targeting reticle flickered on the heads-up display.
"Everyone move back,"
Halsey ordered. The Spartans, from their expressions they were concerned for him but still intensely curious, cleared a ring with a radius of 3 meters around him.
"Listen carefully to me, John," Dr. Halsey said. "I just want you to think, and only think, about moving your arm up to chest level. Stay relaxed."
He willed his arm to move, and his hand and forearm sprang forward to chest level. The slightest motion translated his thought to motion at lightning speed. It had been so fast. If he hadn't been attached to his arm, he might have missed that it had happened at all. The Spartans gasped. Sam applauded. Even lightning-fast Kelly seemed impressed. Dr. Halsey slowly coached John through the basics of walking and gradually built up the speed and complexity of his motions. After 15 minutes, he could walk, run, and jump almost without thinking of the difference between suit motion and normal motion.
"Petty officer, run through the obstacle course," Dr. Halsey said. "We will proceed to fit the other Spartans. We don't have a great deal of time left."
John snapped a salute without thinking. His hand bounced off his helmet, and a dull ache throbbed in his hand. His wrist would be bruised. If his bones hadn't been reinforced, he knew they would have been pulverized.
"Carefully, petty officer. Very carefully, please."
"Yes, ma'am." John focused his mind on motion. He leapt over a 3-meter-high wall. He punched at concrete targets, shattering them. He threw knives, sinking them up to their hafts into target dummies. He slid under barbed wire as bullets zinged over his head. He stood and let the rounds deflect off the armor. To his amazement, he actually dodged 1 or 2 of the rounds. Soon the other Spartans joined him on the course. Everyone ran awkwardly through the obstacles, though they had no coordination. John expressed his worries to Dr. Halsey.
"It will come to you soon enough. You've already received some subliminal training during your last cryosleep," Dr. Halsey told them. "Now all you need is time to get used to the suits."
More worrisome to John was the realization that they'd have to learn how to work together all over again. Their usual hand signals were too exaggerated now. A slight wave or tremble translated into full-force punches or uncontrolled vibrations. They would have to use the comm channels for the time being. As soon as he thought of this, his suit tagged and monitored the other Mjolnir suits. Their standard-issue UNSC neural chip, implanted in every UNSC soldier at induction, identified friendly soldiers and displayed them on their helmet HUDs. But this was different. All he had to do was concentrate on them, and a secure comm channel opened. It was extremely efficient. And, much to his relief, after drilling for 30 minutes, the Spartans had recovered all of their original group coordination, and more. On one level, John moved the suit, and in return, it moved him. On another level, however, communication with his squad was so easy and natural, he could move and direct them as if they were an extension of his body. Over the hangar speakers, the Spartans heard Dr. Halsey's voice. "Spartans, so far so good. If anyone is experiencing difficulties with the suit or its controls, please report in."
"I think I'm in love," Sam replied. "Oh, sorry, ma'am. I didn't think that was an open channel."
"Flawless amplification of speed and power," Kelly said. "It's like I've been training in this suit for years."
"Do we get to keep them?" John asked.
"You're the only ones who can use them, Petty Officer. Who else could we give them to? A technician handed her a headset. "One moment, please. Report, Captain."
Captain Wallace's voice broke over the comm channels.
"We have contact with the Covenant ship, ma'am. Extreme range. Their slip space engines must still be damaged. They're moving toward us via normal space." "Your repair status?" she asked. "Long-range communications inoperable. Slipstream generators offline. Max system destroyed. We have 2 fusion missiles and 20 Archer missile pods intact. Armor plating is at 20%.
There was a long hiss of static.
"If you need more time, I can try and draw them away." "No, Captain," she replied, and carefully scrutinized John and the other armored Spartans. "We're going to have to fight them. And this time, we have to win."
Chapter 14. 2037 hours, November 27, 2525, military calendar. In orbit over Chi Ceti 4. John piloted the Pelican through the exit burn of their orbital path, then sent the ship toward the last known position of the Commonwealth. The frigate had moved 10 million kilometers in system from their rendezvous point. Dr. Halsey sat in the co-pilot seat, fidgeting with her spacesuit. In the aft compartment were the Spartans, the 3 technicians from the Damascus facility, and a dozen spare Mjolnir suits. Missing, however, were the AIs John had seen when they had first arrived. All Dr. Halsey had time to do was remove their memory processor cubes. It was a tremendous waste to leave such expensive equipment behind. Dr. Halsey examined the ship's short-range detection gear, then said,
"Captain Wallace may be trying to use Chi Ceti's magnetic field to deflect the Covenant's plasma weapon. Try and catch up, Petty Officer."
"Yes, ma'am." John pushed the engines to 100%.
"Covenant ship to port," she said. 3 million kilometers and closing on the Commonwealth."
John bumped up the magnification on screen and spotted the ship. The alien vessel's hull was bent at a 30-degree angle from the impact of the Mac Heavy round, but it still moved at almost twice the speed of the Commonwealth. "Doctor," John asked, "does the Mjolnir armor operate in vacuum?"
"Of course," she replied. "It was one of our first design considerations. The suit can recycle air for 90 minutes. It's shielded against radiation and EMP as well."
Then he spoke to Sam over his comlink. "What kind of missiles is this bird carrying?"
"Wait one, sir,"
Sam replied. His voice returned a moment later.
"We have 2 rocket pods with 16 HE Anvil 2s each. I want you to assemble a team and go EVA. Remove those warheads from the wing pods." "I'm on it," Sam said.
Halsey tried to push her glasses up higher on her nose. Instead, she bumped up against the faceplate of her suit's helmet.
"May I ask what you have in mind, Squad Leader?"
John left his comm channel open so the Spartans would hear his reply.
"Requesting permission to attack the Covenant ship, ma'am."
Her blue eyes widened.
"Most certainly not," she said. "If a warship like the Commonwealth couldn't destroy it, a Pelican is certainly no match for them."
"Not the Pelican, no,"
John agreed. "But I believe we Spartans are. If we get inside the enemy ship, we can destroy her." Dr. Halsey considered, tapping her lower lip.
"How will you get on board?"
"We go EVA and use thruster packs to intercept the Covenant ship as it passes en route to the Commonwealth." She shook her head.
"One slight error in your trajectory, and you could miss by kilometers," Dr. Halsey remarked.
A pause. "I don't miss, ma'am," John said.
"They have reflective shields."
"True," John replied. "But the ship is damaged. They may have had to lower or reduce shielding in order to conserve power. And if we have to, we can use one of our own warheads to punch a small hole in the barrier." He paused, then added, "There's also a large hole in their hull. Their shield may not cover that space entirely."
Dr. Halsey whispered, "It's a tremendous risk."
"With respect, ma'am, it's a bigger risk to sit here and do nothing. After they finish with the Commonwealth, they'll come for us, and we'll have to fight them anyway. Better to strike first." She stared off into space, lost in thought. Finally, she sighed in resignation.
"Very well. Go."
She transferred the pilot controls to her station.
"And blow the hell out of them."
John climbed into the aft compartment. His Spartans stood at attention. He felt a rush of pride. They were ready to follow him as he leapt literally into the jaws of death. "I've got the warheads," Sam said. It was hard to mistake Sam, even with his reflective blast shield covering his face. He was the largest Spartan, even more imposing encased in the armor. "Everyone's got one," Sam continued as he handed John a metal shell. "Timers and detonators are already rigged. Stuck on a patch of adhesive polymer. They'll cling to your suit." "Spartans," John said, "grab thruster packs and make ready to go EVA. Everyone else," he motioned to the 3 technicians, "get into the forward cabin. If we fail, they'll be coming after the Pelican. Protect Dr. Halsey." He moved aft. Kelly handed him a thruster pack and he slipped it on.
"Covenant ship approaching," Halsey called out. "I'm pumping out your atmosphere to avoid explosive decompression when I drop the back hatch."
"We'll only get one shot at this," John said to the other Spartans. "Plot an intercept trajectory and fire your thrusters at max burn. If the target changes course, you'll have to make a best guess correction on the fly. If you make it, we'll regroup outside the hole in their hull. If you miss, we'll pick you up after we're done." He hesitated, then added, "And if we don't succeed, then power down your systems and wait for UNSC reinforcements to retrieve you. Live to fight another day. Don't waste your lives." There was a moment of silence. "If anyone has a better plan, speak up now." Sam patted John on the back. "This is a great plan. It'll be easier than Chief Mendez's playground. A bunch of little kids could pull it off." "Sure," John said. "Everyone ready?" "Sir," they said. "We're ready, sir." John flipped the safety off and then punched in the code to open the Pelican's tail. The mechanism opened soundlessly in the vacuum. Outside was infinite blackness. He had a feeling of falling through space, but the vertigo quickly passed. He positioned himself on the edge of the ramp, both hands gripping a safety handle overhead. The Covenant ship was a tiny dot in the center of his helmet's view screen. He plotted a course and fired the thruster pack on maximum burn. Acceleration slammed him into the thruster harness. He knew the others would launch right after him, but he couldn't turn to see them. It occurred to him then that the Covenant ship might identify the Spartans as incoming missiles, and their point defense lasers were too damn accurate. John clicked on the comm channel. "Doctor, we could use a few decoys if Captain Wallace can spare them."
"Understood," she said.
The Covenant vessel grew rapidly in his display. A burst from its engines, and it turned slightly. Traveling at 100 million kilometers an hour, even a minor course correction meant that he could miss by tens of thousands of kilometers. John carefully corrected his vector. The pulse laser on the side of the Covenant ship glowed, built up energy, until they were dazzling neon blue, then discharged, but not at him. John saw explosions in his peripheral vision. The Commonwealth had fired a salvo of her Archer missiles. Around him in the dark were puffballs of red-orange detonations, utterly silent. John's velocity now almost matched that of the ship. He eased toward the hull. 20 meters. 10. 5. And then the Covenant ship started to pull away from him. It was traveling too fast. He tapped his altitude thrusters and pointed himself perpendicular to the hull. The Covenant hull accelerated under him, but he was dropping closer. He stretched out his arms. The hull raced past his fingertips a meter away. John's fingers brushed against something. It felt semi-liquid. He could see his hands skimming a near-invisible, glassy, shimmering surface. The energy shield. Damn! Their shields were still up. He glanced to either side. The huge hole in their hull was nowhere in sight. He slid over the hull, unable to grab hold of it. No! He refused to accept that he had made it this far, only to fail now. A pulse laser flashed 100 meters away. His faceplate barely adjusted in time. The flash nearly blinded him. John blinked and then saw a silvery film rush back around the bulbous base of the laser turret. The shield dropped to let the laser fire? The laser started to build up charge again.
He would have to act quickly. His timing had to be perfect. If he hit that turret before it fired, he'd bounce off. If he hit the turret as it fired, there wouldn't be much left of him. The turret glowed, intensely bright. John set his thrust harness on a maximum burn toward the laser, noting the rapidly dwindling fuel charge. He closed his eyes, saw the blinding flash through his lids, felt the heat on his face, then opened his eyes, just in time to crash and bounce into the hull. The hull plates were smooth, but had grooves and odd organic crenellations. Perfect finger holds. The difference between his momentum and the ship's nearly pulled his arms out of their sockets. He gritted his teeth and tightened his grip. He had made it. John pulled himself along the hull toward the hole the Commonwealth's Mac round had punched in the ship. Only 2 other Spartans waited for him there.
"What took you so long?"
Sam's voice crackled over the comm channel. The other Spartan lifted her helmet's reflective blast shield. He saw Kelly's face.
"I think we're it," Kelly said. "I'm not getting any other responses over the comm channels."
That meant either the Covenant ship shielded their transmissions, or there were no Spartans left to communicate with. John pushed that last thought aside. The hole was 10 meters across. Jagged metal teeth pointed inward. John looked over the edge and saw that the Mac heavy round had indeed passed all the way through. He saw tiers of exposed decks, severed conduits, and sheared metal beams. And through the other side, black space and stars. They climbed down. John immediately fell down on the first deck. "Gravity," he said, "and with nothing spinning on this ship."
"Artificial gravity?" Kelly asked. "Dr. Halsey would love to see this."
They continued inward, scaling the metal walls, past alternating layers of gravity and freefall, until they were approximately in the middle of the ship. John paused and saw the stars wheel outside either end of the hole. The Covenant ship must be turning. They were engaging the Commonwealth. "We'd better hurry." He stepped onto an exposed deck, and the gravity settled his stomach, giving him an up-and-down orientation.
"Weapons check,"
John told them. They examined their assault rifles. The guns had made the journey intact. John slipped in a clip of armor-piercing rounds, noting with pleasure that the suit immediately aligned the sight profile of the gun with his targeting system. He slung the weapon and checked the HE warhead attached to his hip. The timer and detonator looked undamaged. John faced a sealed set of sliding pressure doors. It was smooth and soft to his touch. It could have been made of metal or plastic, could have been alive for all he knew. He and Sam grabbed either side and pulled, strained, and then the mechanism gave and the doors released. There was a hiss of atmosphere, a dark hallway beyond. They entered in formation, covering each other's blind spots. The ceiling was 3 meters high. It made John feel small.
"You think they need all this space because they're so large?" Kelly asked.
"We'll know soon," he told her. They crouched, weapons at the ready, and moved slowly down the corridor, John and Kelly in front. They rounded a corner and stopped at another set of pressure doors. John grabbed the seam. "Hang on," Kelly said. She knelt next to a pad with 9 buttons. Each button was inscribed with runic alien script. "These characters are strange, but one of them has to open this." She touched one and it lit. Then she keyed another. Gas hissed into the corridor. "At least the pressure is equalized," she said. John double-checked sensors. Nothing, though the alien metal inside the ship could be blocking the scans. "Try another," Sam said. She did, and the doors slid apart. The room was inhabited. An alien creature stood 1.5 meters tall, a biped. Its knobby, scaled skin was a sickly mottled yellow. Purple and yellow fins ran along the crest of its skull and its forearms. Glittering, bulbous eyes protruded from skull-like hollows in the alien's elongated head. The Master Chief had read the UNSC's first contact scenarios. They called for cautious attempts at communication. He couldn't imagine communicating with something like this thing. It reminded him of the carrion birds on Reach, vicious and unclean. The creature stood there, frozen for a moment, staring at the human interlopers. Then it screeched and reached for something on its belt, its movements darting and bird-like. The Spartans shouldered their weapons and fired a trio of bursts with pinpoint accuracy. Armor-piercing rounds tore into the creature, shredding its chest and head. It crumpled into a heap without a sound, dead before it hit the deck. Thick blood oozed from the corpse. "That was easy," Sam remarked. He nudged the creature with his boot. "They sure aren't as tough as their ships." "Let's hope it stays that way," John replied. "I'm getting a radiation reading this way," Kelly said. She gestured deeper into the vessel. They continued down the corridor and took a side branch. Kelly dropped a nav marker, and its double blue triangle pulsed once on their heads-up displays. They stopped at another set of pressure doors. Sam and John took up flanking positions to cover her. Kelly punched the same buttons she had punched before, and the doors slid apart. Another of the creatures was there. It stood in a circular room with crystalline control panels and a large window. This time, however, the vulture-headed creature didn't scream or look particularly surprised. This one looked angry. The creature held a claw-like device in his hand, leveled at John. John and Kelly fired. Bullets filled the air and pinged off a silver shimmering barrier in front of the creature. A bolt of blue heat blasted from the claw. The blast was similar to the plasma that had hit the Commonwealth, and boiled 1/3 of it away. The bolt sizzled over their heads. Sam dove forward and knocked John out of the blast's path. The energy burst caught Sam in the side. The reflective coating of his Mjolnir armor flared. He fell, clutching his side, but still managed to fire his weapon. John and Kelly rolled on their backs and sprayed gunfire at the creature. Bullets peppered the alien. Each one bounced and ricocheted off the energy shield. John glanced at his ammo counter. Half gone. "Keep firing!" he ordered. The alien kept up a stream of answering fire. Energy blasts hammered into Sam, who fell to the deck, his weapon empty. John charged forward and slammed his foot into the alien's shield and knocked it out of line. He jammed the barrel of his rifle into the alien's screeching mouth and squeezed the trigger. The armor-piercing rounds punctured the alien and splattered the back wall with blood and bits of bone. John rose and helped Sam up. "I'm okay," Sam said, holding his side and grimacing. "Just a little singed." The reflective coating on his armor was blackened. "You sure?" Sam waved him away. John paused over the remaining bits of the alien. He spotted a glint of metal, an arm guard, and he picked it up. He tapped one of 3 buttons on the device, but nothing happened. He strapped it onto his forearm. Dr. Halsey might find it useful. They entered the room. The large window was a half-meter thick. It overlooked a large chamber that descended 3 decks. A cylinder ran the length of the chamber, and red light pulsed along its length, like a liquid sloshing back and forth. Under the window, on their side, rested a smooth, angled surface. Perhaps a control panel? On its surface were tiny symbols, glowing green dots, bars and squares. "That's got to be the source of the radiation," Kelly said, and pointed to the chamber beyond. "Their reactor, or maybe a weapon system." Another alien marched near the cylinder. It spotted John. A silver shimmer appeared around it. It screeched and wobbled in alarm, then scrambled for cover. "Trouble," John said. "I've got an idea." Sam limped forward. "Hand me those warheads." John did as he asked. So did Kelly. "We shoot out that window, set the timers on the warheads, and toss them down there. That should start the party." "Let's do it before they call in reinforcements," John said. They turned and fired at the crystal. It crackled, splintered, then shattered. "Toss those warheads," Sam said. "Let's get out of here." John set the timers. 3 minutes, he said. "That'll give us just enough time to get topside and get away." He turned to Sam. "You'll have to stay and hold them off. That's an order." "What are you talking about?" Kelly said. "Sam knows." Sam nodded. "I think I can hold them off that long." He looked at John and then Kelly. He turned and showed them the burn in the side of his suit. There was a hole the size of his fist, and beneath that the skin was blackened and cracked. He smiled, but his teeth were gritted in pain. "That's nothing," Kelly said. "We'll get you patched up in no time. Once we get back—" Her mouth slowly dropped open. "Exactly," Sam whispered. "Getting back is going to be a problem for me." "The hole." John reached out to touch it. "We don't have any way to seal it." Kelly shook her head. "If I step off this boat, I'm dead from the decompression," Sam said, and shrugged. "No!" Kelly growled. "No! Everyone gets out alive! We don't leave teammates behind!" "He has his orders," John told Kelly. "You've got to leave me," Sam said softly to Kelly. "And don't tell me you'll give me your suit. It took those techs on Damascus 15 minutes to fit us. I wouldn't even know where to start to unzip this thing." John looked to the deck. The chief had told him he'd have to send men to their deaths. He didn't tell him it would feel like this. "Don't waste time talking," Sam said. "Our new friends aren't going to wait for us while we figure this out." He started the timers. "There, it's decided." A 3-minute countdown appeared in the corner of their heads-up displays. "Now, get going, you two." John clasped Sam's hand and squeezed it. Kelly hesitated, then saluted. John turned and grabbed her arm. "Come on, Spartan, don't look back." The truth was, it was John who didn't dare look back. If he had, he would have stayed with Sam. Better to die with a friend than leave him behind. But as much as he wanted to fight and die alongside his friend, he had to set an example for the rest of the Spartans, and live to fight another day. John and Kelly pushed the pressure doors shut behind them. "Goodbye," he whispered. The countdown timer ticked the seconds off inexorably. 2:35. They ran down the corridor, popped the seal on the outer door. The atmosphere vented. 1:05. They climbed up through the twisted metal canyon that the Mac round had torn through the hull. 33 seconds. "There," John said, and pointed to the base of a charged pulse laser. They crawled toward it, waited as the glow built to a lethal charge. 12 seconds. They crouched and held on to one another. The laser fired. The heat blistered John's back. They pushed off with all their strength, multiplied through the Mjolnir armor. 000. The shield parted and they cleared the ship, hurtling into the blackness. The Covenant ship shuddered. Flashes of red appeared inside the hole. Then a gout of fire rose and ballooned, but curled downward as it hit and rebounded off their own shield. The plasma spread along the length of their vessel. The shield shimmered and rippled silver, holding the destructive force inside. Metal glowed and melted. The pulse laser turrets absorbed into the hull. The hull blistered, bubbled, and boiled. The shield finally gave. The ship exploded. Kelly clung to John. 1,000 molten fragments hurled past them, cooling from white to orange to red, and then disappearing into the dark of the night. Sam's death had shown them that the Covenant were not invincible. They could be beaten. At a high cost, however. John finally understood what the chief had meant. The difference between a life wasted and a life spent. John also knew that humanity had a fighting chance, and he was ready to go to war.